Hello! Oh my god, this is not a drill!
Hi!
Oh my gosh, this is such an honor. How are you? Let's see. Okay, first things first, preliminaries. Can you hear me?
Can. I can.
Excellent. Okay, I can hear you. You are looking so well, so lovely.
Aw, likewise, dude. What a treat to see you this morning.
I am likewise saying, what a treat, what an honor. I went to bed going, oh my gosh, I'm excited to talk to a scientist, and a scientist is excited to talk to me. And then like tiny confetti exploded everywhere in my heart. So
I love that. I love that.
Oh yeah, I'm very animated. I'm like 1,000 cartoons exploding out of one human body. So I like to prepare people with that. Okay, so let's do the official. Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Hernandez, and I have here with me Dr. Carin Bondar, biologist with a twist. What would you like to say to your intro, Dr. Bondar?
Oh, I would just like to say I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk some science with you, and I am so excited by our connection, because we had such a lovely happenstance meeting in New York, maybe 4 years ago now?
Three. Oh, please, I almost remember it to the day. It was July in 2016. You're welcome, world. You're going to hear our meet cute, because our life is a movie. And, yes.
Like that all the time.
See, that's the magic of living. It happens. So I was at Beats of Paradise, and you came in, and I was working there. And you had already gotten your new haircut. I had seen a lot of your work from the Wild Sex on YouTube that you have, that series, which is amazing, by the way. And I just remember hearing your voice, and you were looking at beads. You were making, I think, a light fixture, if I remember correctly.
That's totally what I do. Wow, you have an amazing memory.
Oh, thank you. You know what? Now I see a light fixture behind you. That's all done up with flowers.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do them. That's what I do.
That's amazing.
Pretty.
Yeah. So scientist and an artiste, which I think you have to be to see the art of the world, which is what I feel science is. So.
Right. Yeah, actually, that's a wonderful quote. I heard once that biologists appreciate beauty, and I think that rings very true for me. Yeah,
I can see that.
Which is why I was in the bead shop, because I love all of the beauty. And every city that I go to a lot of different cities for different projects or lectures or TV shows, and I always try to find those beautiful little shops, like yours.
Yes. Oh, once again, Beads of Paradise. I highly recommend to everyone, because it's like a museum in there. It's not just beads, although we do have some pretty cool ones. And it's stone, it's wood, it's horn, lots of nature pieces, glass, and man-made pieces as well, which are beautiful. A lot of people like to sweep it under the rug, but, humans do incredible things.
We do. Yeah, we do.
Yes, I remember I kept asking you, like, do you come in here often? You look so familiar. And I remember you feeling, oh, well, to me, it felt like you were wary, like, no, I don't know who this person is. And finally, I was like, well, what is your name? And you told me it was Carin. And I was like, that's what it is. You sound like Dr. Carin Bondar. And then you told me.
That's who I am. Yes. And it was like this amazing pinnacle moment in my life, because I'm like, what? I'm in New York City? And no one knows who I am? Oh, it was amazing.
Oh, it was. I jumped around the counter. I had to bounce out like I'm a bunny, and I remember I embraced you. I didn't ask first. I think I asked after. And it was just so magical. And so, yeah. Let's talk about your work. Let's talk about how cool you are, because sex in the animal kingdom fascinates me, and I definitely bring it up with people, and a lot of it definitely comes from your material, because the world is a world charged with sexual energy. It's what creates everything, and it also creates a lot of conflict in the human culture. So I like to compare how, humans are animals, no matter what people would like to say, and so many different animals in the animal kingdom sort of relate to things that we do or don't do, except that animals also don't have human qualities, which is what trips us up. So tell me how you got started in this field.
I love that. I mean, I could spend my whole life thinking about this question. I'm kind of obsessed with this question about, where does the sort of the primate, I mean, we are primates, but where do we leave our closest relatives, and what are some of those main differences? I love to use a lot of anthropomorphism when I'm talking about these examples. So I love to sort of put human qualities on animals for the sense of education. I definitely, for me, that works well. It's a good way to compare, because the best way to teach someone about something, I think, is by giving them something familiar. And that's why sex is such a wonderful and resonating topic. And it's really, a lot of the stuff that I talk about, it's not gratuitous. Like, we definitely get the stabby penises and the, sexual cannibalism and, stabbing each other, there's weapons and stuff like that. But, there's so many interesting biological reasons why this kind of thing occurs. And I just love to take this topic that everybody's kind of obsessed with anyway, and bring other sort of awarenesses around animal behavior, around general science. If you look at a lot of, some of the less awesome things happening in the world, as far as weather events, as far as, human migrations and stuff, these are all biological patterns that can actually be traced back down to sex. Animals survive and reproduce. That's what we do. And so, on a big level, on a big philosophical species and animal and planet level, sex is everything.
Yes. And to bring it back to what you said, it's what we do. We survive, we reproduce. We survive, we reproduce. But humans tend to have this habit of doing things that interrupt our survival, even when we know it interrupts our survival, such as we love to poison ourselves, forget one another. We drink alcohol, we smoke substances, people may inject drugs into their body, and we know that's not good, but humans tend to do it for a kick. And animals, as far as I know, very rarely, I won't say never, we know dolphins pass around pufferfish to get high or something like that. Yeah. So, but
you know what? I think it's such a good point, Danielle. This is such a huge part of my work. Actually, addiction is something that I'm very close to. I'm actually an addictions therapist. I don't even remember if I told you that.
No, I have no idea. That's amazing.
It's like a side part of my life, but it fits beautifully in the context of biology, because yes, I sort of really am perplexed by addiction and what it means in our brain. And we do see other animals with big brains, things like mammals. So I remember reading a paper once about goats. Mountain goats, they can climb mountains really steep. And there's a certain type of hallucinogenic lichen. And a lichen is a combination of an algae and a fungus that live together on rocks. They kind of encrust on rocks. And the goats would actually go and eat this lichen, and they would actually grind their teeth off. They would eat it so much because it was hallucinogenic.
Whoa.
Now, right? So I feel like animals could potentially become addicted to things. They just don't have the opportunity. Another example is, when fruits, berries in a tree start to ferment, and then certain, monkeys or birds who are eating those fruits actually do get drunk. And we can't really figure out if they are enjoying that or how they feel. We can't ask them, hey, awesome, are you having a great time? Are you going to be in trouble? But the thing is, then those berries all fall off the tree, and a bunch of birds came, and they all got some, and then so we could relate that to a human party where there's enough alcohol for one party, and then that's it. There's just no more alcohol. So then no more humans can get drunk or, keep partying or keep damaging. So our brain is actually the culprit here, because our brain has actually figured out that, we can make unlimited alcohol. We can make unlimited things to smoke and inject and stuff. No other animals can do that, you see. The goats, they run out of the lichen, they're done. The birds, they run out of the berries, they're done. Humans, we're like, no, we'll just make that on mass scale. And so, yes, it is this perplexing thing where we are both super smart and also super fallible.
Yes.
And it perplexes me, and this is where I like to spend my time thinking.
that's what we're doing here today, because everything like going on in the world, when I reached out to you, I expressed particularly what's going on in Alabama, in Georgia with these anti-abortion laws. What I'm very interested in is the dynamic between men and women in the human race and their focus on who gets to control when we reproduce. And how does that relate to the animal kingdom? What is that similar to? What is that very different from? Because I grew up conditioned to believe all women want babies, and there are lots of women who generally do want to have children and to be mothers, and there's also a very fair amount of women who absolutely do not want to partake in that at all. And then the debate becomes, does that woman have the right to choose? And of course the answer is yes. But we've also come from male-dominated societies for millennia to as far back and until some pretty ancient cultures. And I recall the very first video of yours I ever saw was "You Can't Rape an Elephant," in which you spoke about the female elephants and female hyenas having distended vaginas, and thus, until she decided that she wanted to copulate with the male and pulled it back in, you couldn't do anything, and they were matriarchal societies. Will you talk some more about that?
I love that, absolutely. And I wonder why no other scientists are going down this road, or at least not that many, because for me, it is this amazing, undeniable trend that when you take the penis power away from a male, which is exactly what happens in these elephant and hyena societies, like males have them, but they don't mean anything. That has changed the way that social interactions in these populations have evolved. And absolutely, you see the males fall right down. Why? There's a lot of reasons, I'm sure. But females create these matriarchal societies where they then get all the jobs done according to the female way, and they keep the males out. Now, that's very unusual in the mammal kingdom, or in the mammal world. But one big thing, and I think this really relates to the major arguments going on in some states with respect to the anti-abortion laws, which is any mammal has internal fertilization, and that means that when a male has, dropped his one seed, thanks for the one cell, into a female, that's all he can do, right? Okay, so it's like, imagine you want to build a building, and you need a shovel and everything else. And so a man drops off a shovel, and then a woman does everything else, and then there's a big building.
Wow.
Okay, so that's kind of how babies are made.
Yeah.
Right? And so should a male have any rights? God, no. And we see this in the animal kingdom, in the mammalian world. We see this reflected in a generally zero monogamy, zero partnership kind of a role. We do not see monogamous mammals other than humans, if you can even call humans monogamous. Right. We see males being promiscuous, much like we saw, I don't know if you remember when that Ashley Madison big bust happened, and there was like 30 million men on there.
Oh goodness, no, I don't actually.
So it was basically this website where you could go on and cheat on your spouse, like it was specifically for cheating, and it all got exposed and blah, 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 and it just turned out that there was mostly men on there.
Shocking.
And according to biology, that makes perfect sense, though.
Right. There you go. And you hear it often. Sow your wild oats. Sow those wild seeds.
Totally. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, a male spits out 70 million sperms in one ejaculate, right?
Wow.
One.
At least one of them's got to make it.
Right? But that means that, comparatively speaking, we have one egg every month. Just one. And that, that's a big choice for us. And I think that kind of comes down to the divide between males and females in the animal kingdom, because males have these abundant and cheap gametes to give out, and females have very, very expensive and rare ones, that they really need to think about who and when that's going to get fertilized by and how and all those kinds of things. And I just find it almost comical how we run into these issues in our day-to-day lives as humans. This is biology.
At its core, at its finest. And I also find biology, I mean, it's a physical science, but I find, like you mentioned, the philosophy of biology, it does penetrate deeper than the physical form. Like, it's part of our mental world, it's part of our emotional world. And as you said, it's very expensive for a woman to produce her one egg a month, and she must be selective about the male. She needs someone who will stick around and be able to protect both herself and her child, again, as we see in the animal kingdom. And with us living in a time where we're seeing traditional roles being challenged in a whole new way, a whole new level, multiple levels, I would actually say, we're seeing, I want to say, like a retreat into the way societies were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Like, we're trying to go back because it feels familiar, and in the male-dominated societies, men would get to pick their choose of all of the women, which, I mean, is still fine. Men and women make their choices, but I'm more curious about, as human women who may have to make that very difficult decision to abort, like, a lot of people tend to sweep it under the rug like it's a passing decision, like, oh, I think I'll have an abortion today, which is cruel, and it's flippant, it's just being ignorant about what it truly means to have the capacity to do that. Like, what are the circumstances that would cause such a decision to be made? I think that needs to be explored. And again, do we see anything like that at all in the animal kingdom where a mother would have to make that decision?
You know, interestingly, gosh, are you a biologist in sheep's clothing? Because you ask really good questions.
Thank you.
That is such a good question, and a lot of times, because sex in the animal kingdom is set up to be so unfair, as in, you know, this vast dichotomy between males and females and their offerings, and generally the physicality with which they can bring it. Rape is common, okay? We call that sexual coercion, but it is rape. It's animal rape. And female bodies actually have a suite of physiological adaptations that often result in abortions that they don't cognitively necessarily even process, but the body recognizes that the timing isn't right, that the partner isn't right, that something is not right, and then abortions will actually happen preemptively. It's something called the Bruce effect, actually, and what that means is, and it's been studied primarily in primates. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's named the Bruce effect after the first guy who studied it again. That females who are pregnant, when a new alpha male comes into a population, automatically abort. They're just abort because they know or they know. I mean, I don't mean that they actually know, but the evolution has designed these systems to be sensitive to the fact that a new alpha is going to come in, kill all the babies, and make his own babies anyway. And so their bodies have actually adapted to that. Now, that is really taken it a whole other step further and much past the debate in the human world.
Right, because we're talking primates here that you were just
primates.
Let me clarify, not human primates.
Okay, right. Non-human primates, totally. But this is where it gets nebulous, right? Because it's like,
because I've actually heard that argument before, that you bring it up. Like, that argument has come up in political debates, that the human body has the capacity to just abort as well. And can you relate these two subjects for me?
Yeah, so I mean, I think absolutely, we would be foolish to assume that if this happens in other primates, that it does not have it in humans. And certainly female humans have have spontaneous abortions. Sometimes they don't even realize they've had them. And so there certainly could be some of these cryptic female choice mechanisms at work there, or if there is something, you know, invalid or wrong with the pregnancies, we can still rely on our bodies to get rid of those. Now, what we can't do is, in this case, you know, in all of these cases where there has been, I don't want to say non-consensual sex, which is often the case in these situations where an abortion is warranted. What the major legislation does not take into account is that whole shovel versus apartment block analogy that I brought up with you earlier. Like, why are men in court arguing whether or not they have a right in this when all they freaking did was show up with a shovel? Like, it's really, the man doesn't have to do anything. And this is where I get a little bit passionate about these arguments.
Bring it up. Let's see it.
Right? It's just like a woman, when she becomes pregnant, I mean, from the moment an embryo, one of her eggs is fertilized, creates an embryo, this sets in motion an irreversible chain of events, physiological, emotional, physical. Okay, so she starts out as one animal, and then she goes through a pregnancy, which contains many of the most energetically expensive things a mammal will ever do. And then she concludes that pregnancy by going through birth and then lactating, which is the most expensive thing a mammal can ever do. And she is never the same animal again. Okay, wow. So she goes through all of this thing. She totally transforms her physiology. She becomes a different animal. And this is a point that I really wanted to stress with wild moms, was like, motherhood isn't just a thing where like, oh, I'll have a baby now. Pop it out. Okay, great. This is awesome. It's not like that. It is like an entire identity overhaul. And the physiological things that happen, some of them are great. I mean, some of them make our brains more efficient because we have to put in the same amount of work in this, much more work in the same amount of time. So we become great at multitasking. We become great at stress management, at organization and things like that. But the bottom line is our entire physiology, psychology is hijacked for this period of gestation, but also this period of lactation, and also forever. Like, I mean, have we not talked about, we haven't heard about postpartum depression. This is something that happens to many women because our lives are now so unnatural that when we do something as natural as having a baby, and we're expected to rely back on our biological reserves for what this means, and we are sort of in the middle of this storm of natural, unnatural. Do I formula feed? Do I bottle feed? Do I breastfeed? Do I use a crib? Do I, all these things. And this mix up of physiology, like mama's body is still caught up in all that. And I feel like that's what these arguments are missing. They're not talking about the reality of what motherhood is. It's motherhood.
That's exactly right. It's completely removing the mother's experience from motherhood, in which case you just have a concept. And motherhood's not a concept. It's a livelihood, okay? It's the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And the rest of your energy, you're no longer thinking exclusively about the form that you are. And even when we're in our forms as our single selves, when we are thinking about ourselves, we're not even meeting all of those needs as we ought to be in the first place. So to need to be doing that for a whole new vulnerable being on top of yourself so that you can continue to nurture this vulnerable being. Oh, actually, I'm glad I just used the word nurture, because nurturing is fundamental in making sure anything can thrive. Animal, plant, human, which is an animal, world, I'm talking to you. And there's so much removal of nurture in the human kingdom at the moment. There's so much deniability that we need nurturing beyond those first formative years. But we know that's not true. We know as humans we still have the need not just to eat, but physical touch is very important in human world. And that's one huge thing that I feel it's like one of the big boulders that begins to crumble the natural biological instincts we have, because human touch is denied in so many cultures, whether it's religious or not. I know I'm pausing here like I have another thing to say, but I'm just letting that soak for a moment. But yes, so mothers must be biologically close to their child, and we live in a society where men, now that I'm an adult, I can see it, men really are the ones who seem to be wanting children more adamantly than women, because we do have to be more selective, and men don't.
Drop off the shovel.
I mean, right? That blew my mind. Like, I didn't understand that when I was younger. I thought no men wanted kids, because you hear tropes like, you know, get out of there while you can, and don't let the old ball and chain catch you. Right, which is sort of human capacities to ensuring you've got to mate if you plan on having a family, or whether or not you plan on having a family. You've got to mate if a family is spawned. And so a lot of nurture that you see in males is actually being denied. Where do I want to go with this? I just want to hear your opinion on that. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm getting up on a soapbox over here, so.
No, I mean, I think you raise so many valid points, and I don't want to come down on dads who really do take on a role and that really do help. But you know, recognizing that there are those dads, that's awesome. Okay, great. Thanks, dads. Great. Okay. Now, the whole argument where a male, you know, sort of, I guess that's where it comes in, is a male's the sort of breadwinner, I guess. That's the traditional model. And maybe that's when you were saying about, you know, hundreds of years ago, women had far fewer choices as far as, you know, wow, could we even vote? You can be a nurse or a secretary, you know what I mean? And great, those were great at the time, but, you know, we're through the years and through the various changes in human populations, we are getting more rights and more abilities to do things. Now, I think that the advent of medical technology, especially in the context of motherhood, is really changing the game. Because we are enabling ourselves to have a bit more freedom in the context of newborns. We have formula. We have, you know, very good holding things, that skin on skin you mentioned. There's a lot that we know about our biology that can facilitate dads providing more help. But that does not negate the fact that females undergo a complete biological transformation during this process. And frankly, it shouldn't be a debate that any man has a say in, because his body isn't getting transformed into a totally different vessel. He ejaculated.
Yeah, you could do that in your sleep, gentlemen. And
probably have been.
This is not to shame you. I'm just saying it happens. We all know it.
It's what it is. Right? But just get over yourself. Like, stop it. It's one cell. Yeah.
And, I mean, a woman's body, I know after a woman gives birth, things like her uterus can prolapse. Is that correct? Her bladder is moved often. Like, forevermore, your bladder is going to have a different action in your body because a baby was inside you and moved all of your organs.
Right?
I don't know if people are understanding this entirely. All of your organs.
Right? Why are men making these freaking decisions?
Yes.
His organs are not getting rearranged. Like, they're not getting their vaginas ripped in half. Like, what? Like,
which can actually happen. That's exactly what, like, I want to remove a lot of mystery of womanhood, and especially because for so long, women were not allowed to learn about their own biology, their own bodies, where the knowledge was removed from our hands. And we don't live in that time right now.
That's it.
That's exactly why we're having this conversation today, for other women who also have the capacity to do something, say something, put themselves in a position of power, because that's exactly what it comes down to. The men who are making these decisions will never go through the experience that they're trying to control, and in the past did control.
Yep.
Now on that note, oh no, what were you going to say? What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that's so right. And then to have to legislate biology, that's where humans really can't figured this out, and it's not surprising we can't figure it out. We shouldn't need to be legislating our own biology. This is tricky.
You know, it's tricky because we apply morality, which is a human thing. And I actually had this interaction a couple of weeks ago that I would love to share with you. I was at a barbecue, a fire pit barbecue. We're sitting across the fire, and I had mentioned that I was going to be having this talk with you, and they were like, oh, who's Dr. Carin Bondar? So I'm sharing wild animal sex, and one thing, whenever I talk about animal sex, I bring up ducks and duck rape, because once you learn about it, you can't unlearn it. And so it blew my mind that, you know, the male ducks, not only, they have a corkscrew penis that can shoot out and snatch you out of midair, but the female duck has evolved to have false passages. Some of them are booby-trapped. The fact that this species continues at all kind of freaks me out. And, I mean, little ducks are so cute. Horrifying to know about duck rape. But the reason I bring that up is because immediately at the fire pit, one guy goes, well, you're applying human morals on animals. And, you know, to some aspect, I was like, okay, maybe. But then my next thought was, excuse me, sir, do you think rape is a moral issue? Because it's not. It's a dominance issue. And the fact that, I mean, obviously the conversation bothered him. Very, very, conservative, although I hesitate to say that because I feel like people who are genuinely conservative can still recognize when biological proceeds exist in different aspects. But to apply that idea that we are putting morals on animals, but really, we're the animals that we put morals on. So exactly that. Yes, sir. Yes. So bringing that up, and we know, like, yes, rape exists in the human culture, and that's why I brought up nurture before, because I find that women would choose not to have the child of someone they know is abusive and attacked them in the first place. And also, when you're forming a being that came out of a traumatic experience, are you even, like, we have mental and emotional capacity that we know affects us. We're not purely biologically driven. And the nurture changes in that regard. You apply nurture differently. And so, by putting women in these circumstances, like, maybe I want to rephrase that. If we could just begin teaching people, and children in particular, that the nurture must exist on both sides, that when we do that, we're a social species, we have to come together and be social together. That's when you're more apt and more inclined to want to reproduce, and you don't have to have that control and dominance. Are there any animals that you would link to, you see a strong social bond, and because of that you see strong social families?
Yeah, you know, you definitely do. And you see a lot of that kind of more cooperation in the bird world. And you see that because there's this specific thing that happens with birds, and that is the laying of eggs. And the eggs get laid really early. Okay. So that means that either the mom or the dad can help sit on the eggs, right? So dad actually has a legitimate job to do, which is different than in the mammalian area where dad really has nothing to do. So we see females and males forming more monogamous partnerships in some cases in the bird world. Even if they are a monogamous couple, there's generally some cuckolding and, you know, there's generally some extra sex on the side. But repeat partners, so partners that have been together for several seasons, even several years, actually can realize a greater reproductive success because they are familiar with each other. It's akin to, you know, a married couple having been together for a long time. Just kind of, there's comfort, there's familiarity, you know how to do it, you do it better. So yes, there is definitely evidence for that in the bird world. And I'm trying to think of a mammalian example because it would be really great if I could think of a fuzzy, warm, happy mammal story to share. I mean, certainly there are some primates that do nurture and that do love and that do express emotion and support for one another. I mean, the bonobos are highly sexually charged species that are equally related to us, as equal as chimps. So we have two closest primate relatives, chimps and pygmy chimps or bonobos. The chimps are very, very violent and coercive, but the bonobos are not. The bonobos are much more, I don't want to say relaxed necessarily, but they solve conflict through sex, which makes them much more amenable to exchange. Some of that communication you were talking about, some of that, that humans need that. We're social species. We need some of those reinforcements. And so there are some examples in the mammalian world where there is that nurturing and that building of family, but it's really not terribly common in mammals. Humans then created this monogamous system where we follow it, sort of, and there is this expectation that there will be much more nurturing and help coming in from the father side, and a lot of times there is, and that works great, and people raise families and they have an awesome time, I guess. But we have to recognize that there are many times when that just doesn't occur.
Yeah.
The other thing that you brought up when you were describing the situation is the fact that if a female has conceived a baby during a rape or in a relationship that's abusive, there are so many physiological markers and potential for developmental effects on the baby based on mom's stress level. Now, we're very buffered. The human body is very buffered, so chances are, it's not like there will be birth defects, physiological major things like that. But as far as that baby's reactivity to stress, and conversely, so once the baby has been born, if mom is still stressed, if mom is still really messed up over it, the care that she gives the baby is going to reflect that. And I just don't see why it's so hard for us to recognize these basic truths about the way physiology and biology work. How come moms who get raped are expected to take on this whole thing by themselves? And that is just, that's like asking me to eat this computer for breakfast. Like, it makes no sense.
I'm so glad you say that. And as well, like, when we have the knowledge and we choose not to apply it, we're choosing not to do things better than we did in the past, which, again, blows the mind. Why, humans? Why? And
Power.
Right. Okay. Power is 100% the reason for everything that humans do, isn't it? I mean, for example, we know that society thrives when it has clean water. As long as you've got clean water, you're going to be able to do things. But we also know as humans that we actively go out of our way to pollute water. And it's counterintuitive, people. So humans are very counterintuitive, it would seem. And it does make no sense, especially when you know humans want to have other humans. We like to be around other people, generally. I feel like there's an idea being planted that humans don't like other humans and that you don't want to be around other people. But we know that's not true. We seek out friends, we seek out social groups, we create families, one way or another. And yeah, are there other animals? I mean, I find that humans are quite large, so we have less pregnancies than some other animals would, and our life expectancy is also different. Do you think that our life expectancy and our size is a huge reason why the humans keep trying to enforce, like, mass population that we know we don't need? We're not a dying species. We're not a dying breed. But we're still forcing, because that's what it is. We're forcing babies to be born when we know that we probably can't take care of all of them as well as we are capable of. And in animals, like, I know the panda bear, she's a large animal, and she can only afford to have one. If she gives multiple births, I've read that she'll have to choose, which is a very difficult decision for anyone to make. So where else do you see that, like the size of an animal and the dominance of the animal? Do those correlate? Do those correlate, I'm asking?
Yeah. So yes, definitely we see, larger animals have fewer offspring as a general rule. So large mammals generally have one or two. Some of mid-sized mammals will have a litter, things like that. So, you said something really interesting about the polar bears, and I was like,
oh, the panda bear, I was saying. But if you have a polar bear example.
Oh, right, yes, panda bear, the panda. So yes, you raise this point about when a female in nature has an offspring, or maybe two or more, she has to do this thing called vet hedging, which is, resources are not predictable, especially in today's climate. We're having major ocean currents are changing, and a lot of animals simply can't find enough food. So something I'm thinking of is maybe like a sea lion or something like that. So they will, yes, choose is a tough word, but generally speaking, the older offspring, the one who she's put more resources into, will be the one she favors, and then the smaller one will generally die. Now, that is very common, and I think you've hit on a point that I really want to make here, which is in the rest of the animal kingdom, babies and moms and dads and whomever die all the time because of resource shortage, and because of things that humans would consider ourselves to be above. So now we're in the human context, we say, no, this family has rights to resources. Even though there may not even be resource enough for those offspring, we have this rule that there needs to be because they're a human. And that's really, we get into some really tricky areas, because the reason it's not working is because of biology, but we can't fix the problem the way biology would, which is to say populations would be cut, animals would die, because we have taken that out of the equation for us because of our morals. So it's really tricky. I mean, you look at something like an ant colony. This is totally bringing it to a really extreme example here. But, these colonies work perfectly. Not perfectly, but really well. They all work for a common good, to secure resources for themselves and to make the colony good. Some of them clean it, some of them get food, some of them reproduce, da-da-da-da. And if you step out of line of this colony, it's like the worst force of communism. You get killed. Don't step out of line. If you're a garbage collector, don't try to collect food because you will get killed. That's just how ants work. And that's how they're able to create such immense, complex, and functional societies. So humans, we do the opposite thing, because we don't do that anymore. We can't enforce biological rules. So, if everyone's waiting in a long line in traffic and some jerk speeds right up to the front and gets in, someone's always going to let him in. But in the ant world, that guy would get killed. Wow. So it's we don't have rules like that anymore, and you can even apply that to something like abortion and reproduction. These are tough conversations to have, but the reason why we have these problems is because we are biological creatures trying to contextualize ourselves in a non-biological framework. It doesn't work.
Oh, goodness gracious. And especially not with the methods that we've already used and have already exhausted. We tend to keep beating the dead horse with the stick, waiting for it to walk. And that's just bizarre, because, again, we have the capacity to learn. Humans are curious by nature, and we try and clip that curiosity pretty early on to get more of that ant colony conformity. But we're not ants, so...
I know, right?
Right. But, we bring it back to, it is a difficult conversation. It will always be a difficult conversation, but it has to be had. Mothers have to do some pretty crazy things in this world. I mean, you wrote the book, Wild Moms. And, you could tell us, moms have to go beyond just having the baby. So what are some circumstances that really, you should never underestimate a mother, because a mother will do something like this? What are things that you've seen that you'd like to share?
There are so many beautiful stories that way, because I think the stories that resonate most with me in terms of those strong maternal bonds are when we see females coming together for each other. And there's really two times when those, strong, emotional, beautiful, unspoken connections are very obvious for mothers. And that is during birth. So mothers will stick with mothers during birth and provide help and support. And that's really interesting and key because fathers specifically aren't there at births, which makes perfect sense because why would they be? Like, in the mammal world, they're not going to do anything else. In the mammal world, probably they're not even remotely even close by, and they've gotten, many other females pregnant by then. Anyway, now, the other time when females come together to nurture and support one another in the context of motherhood is when a baby dies. And this could happen because of resource shortage, or it could happen for who knows, any number of reasons. But this is when we can again see that unspoken solidarity, the energy, or however you want to call that emotional transfer between moms. We can absolutely see that during these times of great joy and great mourning. Again, males tend to stay far away from females during these times, even not matriarchal societies. I'm thinking things like giraffes and other ungulates that have really interesting behaviors around that. So I can't quite remember if I'm actually answering the question you asked, but those are two really great examples of where, motherhood transcends, I guess, basic reality, even just for a minute, because moms sit together and mourn. And what we're expecting women to do is all of this without necessarily even having wanted to. That's a lot. It's a lot to ask of a female. Of any species, right? So.
Exactly. And there's always a lack of recognition of what's truly going on behind the scenes. Life and death is everything that we experience on this planet. And in this day and age, I feel, especially here in America, we're very removed from the concept of death because, pestilence and famine aren't on every corner the way it was 1,000 years ago. And actually...
But it's happening in other places,
But it's happening, exactly. In other places, we're seeing it. We're seeing famine. We're seeing families still being born, but the resources aren't there. So that brings me to my next topic, which is contraception. Another huge conflict for people, but oftentimes a good prevention to when you experience these lack of resources. So contraception, is there anything, are there naturally occurring substances that cause a contraceptive effect in the female body? Not just for humans, but for animals. Do animals seek contraceptives in any circumstances? Does that exist?
Yeah, it does. And so there's a couple things. There's, first of all, physiological mechanisms that kind of act as contraception. So if a female is experiencing an extreme resource shortage or some kind of violence, or if things are really bad for her in one way or another, her body will generally abort the baby. So that, I guess you could look at that as kind of a physiological, natural contraceptive for.
Would that be, I'm sorry to interrupt, but would that be considered like a miscarriage? Is a miscarriage similar, different to a
same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, the body would kind of rate it, and so the further a female it is along, the less likely that becomes for the body to spontaneously abort it. So I guess maybe the specific naming around that happens at different times.
Okay.
A miscarriage might be something more like when the baby is closer to actual development and has died for another reason. But spontaneous abortion can actually be maybe considered a form of contraception, and not really, because the sex is still happening, and her body is kind of taking care of that for her. Now, humans actually take contraceptive pills or whatever, condoms, whatever else, to specifically not have more offspring than our bodies could have, which is a totally interesting phenomenon, especially in the context of survive and reproduce. But actually, I read a study several years ago about some baboons in Africa that would specifically utilize plums on a specific kind of African black plum. When it came into season, females would always preferentially go for the plum. And they're generalist feeders, so they really could eat anything they wanted, but the females really wanted these plums. And it turned out they had such a high level of progesterone in the plums that it would shut the female cycles down for several months at a time. And, the researchers, again, scientists have to be so staunch in the way that they interpret their results. I fall out of that category because I'm a bit wacky and I don't have to answer to any peer review. But the thing is, so the scientist who found out that the females were doing this was just like, well, it's probably because physiologically the plums actually, make her skip some cycles. And then when she starts ovulating again, she's got more energy and she's got a healthier body, which could totally be true. That certainly could speak to perhaps taking a pause before the next pregnancy. But on the other hand, I just want to say the female orangutans are like high-fiving each other and being like, come here, you get pregnant. Like,
that's amazing.
Like, these are closest primate relatives. Like, come on. They're probably like, yes, if you eat these, you won't have babies. It'll be awesome. Like, totally. Like, come on.
I mean, the fact that it's even an issue, again, it's the morality thing, which is so frustrating because sex exists in so many different levels. Yes, it's a biological function, but we also have sex recreationally. It's a bonding experience. You mentioned the bonobos used it to resolve conflict. So sex exists even on a biological level beyond procreation.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and so the fact that contraception is readily available, and you see it, and I love that example of, you said, was it chimps? Chimps, you said?
It was a species of baboon. A
species of baboon. And yes, that they're eating these plums. And this is the other thing. Animals know their bodies. I find that as humans, we are sort of conditioned into believing that we don't know what's going on in our bodies. But I also feel like we're trained out of our instincts. Oftentimes, we can sense when something is off or when we ought to seek help. And so the fact that the animals are seeking out these plums and they're having these effects, and sure, the fact that months later you end up more energetic and stronger, all of these are pluses. I don't see why we would negate that contraceptive effect.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
It's like, the totally same thing.
But I love that we can talk about it in the way that makes sense to us. And I think science is going in a more generally accepting direction of the emotions of animals. Now, that said, I also really think you've made a couple of valid points that we have been conditioned out of our instincts. That is a huge point that, as you alluded earlier as well, we have these big brains. We have this ability to understand what we should be putting in our bodies, and yet we eat, fast food, and, we eat so much junk that is directly opposed to our health and our reproductive health, that it is a conundrum. And so other animals don't have those options, which makes their overall reproductive health probably much more straightforward. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so there's just so many, layers to the argument when we take biology and social culture and emotional culture and then legislation and policy. It's absolutely nuts. And with respect to the argument about contraception, my apologies for that.
No worries. I know we're getting close to our time. I don't want to take go over.
No, but with respect to contraception, I mean, that's another whole argument about biology. We also had the one-child rule in China, which, again, it wasn't a contraceptive rule. Well, I guess it was to the tune where they didn't want people to have more than one child. But what this did was actually just resulted in 50 million extra bachelors who will then not really probably ever get a chance to spread their genetic seed. So, I mean, was that a biological win? I don't know. But it's just a biological concept that we can't we can't keep ignoring that we are animals, because it's like obvious in every facet of what we're seeing. You know, these mass human migrations. Are you kidding me? It's animals moving from where there's nothing to where there's something. Like,
thank you for saying it. Like, I don't understand. No, I do understand. I mean, I grew up in a Catholic school, so I grew up with a lot of that conditioning, and I consider Catholicism like my mythology. I appreciate it, but I also can see the world for beyond what they had available to them. And I feel like it's this relationship with God that humans feel akin to, whether they are religious or not religious. There's this higher power that we're constantly trying to make rules for and say, well, this higher power says we've got to do it this way. And because I spoke for the higher power, you got to listen to me now. And it's like things that worked in ancient times aren't necessary now. You don't have to stone your wife for being unfaithful because she might have someone else's offspring anymore. And we also know that's why you were doing it. Like, it's another way to guarantee your genetic line. And so, again, it's 2019. We're living now.
We know much more now.
We know much more now. We have new ways, like you were mentioning, this advance in scientific technology, that we're able to see cells dividing. This never existed before. And to keep trying to tamp down very vital knowledge is dangerous and lethal. It's as lethal as putting poisons in our body willfully. It is putting poison in our body willfully.
And it's legislating pregnancies that should happen, should not happen, whatever. It's just legislating things that can't and shouldn't be legislated. And yes, back in sort of the Middle Ages, and you know, we hadn't had the explosion of technologies and understanding about what we are and what sickness is and what various, you know, aspects of our lives that make us into the animals that we are. And so maybe could we forgive that? I don't know. It was a pretty dark time. There was a lot of bad stuff that happened. But again, you see things like the Black Plague, and the Black Plague did what it was biologically, I guess, supposed to do, which was it wiped everybody out. There was too many, right? And so, but we're so clever now. We don't have those kinds of high-level issues anymore because we can fix them. And so we don't have an excuse, I would say, anymore to
Thank you.
allow a deity to be responsible. Come on, man.
Right, exactly.
Like, and then spiritual. Let's love what we don't get, but let's not make that responsible for everything.
I agree. Yeah. And when you have the knowledge, like, we know how to do things. We know keeping clean is vital to survival, and feeding is vital to survival, and that creating whatever pair bond works for you is vital to survival. Now it's time to apply that. So when we're seeing these things in states like Alabama, like Georgia, I have a whole list here, a list, I'm looking at you, over 9 states in the United States of America in 2019 have passed an anti-abortion bill where it doesn't even allow for rape or, wait, get this, and this one biologically confuses me, incest. It does not allow for incest, and incest is a biological corruption, isn't it? Or...
Yeah, I mean, incest is one of those things that, because you are more genetically related to your direct relatives, you are more likely to carry negative mutations or negative alleles or expressions of certain genes because you are closely related. So if you interbreed then with someone you're closely related to, chances are you may have some more genetic issues. Not to mention that socially that doesn't make sense. I mean, that's one thing that we see even down to things like cockroaches. They have cuticular hydrocarbons that allow them to identify family versus non-family. And we can look towards these kind of animals that even have reasons to not reproduce with close relatives. This is something that evolution has dealt with very, very clearly and easily a long, long time ago. And
underline and bold that statement, please and thank you.
It perplexes me endlessly. Like, I just can't. I don't get it.
I don't know. I know that in this day and age, going forward, I just want to, be loud and be like, we have the knowledge and we can do it better, so we're going to do it better. And to start highlighting the people who are not doing it better, are in fact like shooting us in the foot. It serves nothing except to hinder and injure. Ooh, those rhyme. And injuring humanity is injuring the world. Yes. So, like, a time to heal. I'm so glad we had this conversation. I don't want to, like, run off. I also don't want to run over your time. You're so amazing. I want to sum up with this other thing. There had been, I think it was on Netflix, a series called The Science of Attraction, and it was talking about human attraction. And like you were just speaking about, what is it, the cuticulars in cockroaches? That humans, we can smell one another, and that's important because our own family members, like for example, like my father, my brother, I can smell they're related to me because they have a smell that's different than a viable male that I'd be like, well, this guy smells really good. So we have that too. We have all of our biological needs.
Yeah, well, animals have that. Yeah, we tend to flush all of these pheromonal cues down the toilet, right? But if we actually, or down in the shower or whatever, and if we actually listen to them more, absolutely. And it's called, reproductive blocks, because no animals knowingly reproduce with sieves and whatever. Most animals can tell that, as you just said so beautifully. You can actually smell them differently. Yes, you can. We all can, but we don't, because we put clothes on and we take showers and perfumes and whatever, and we basically make it so that we can't tell.
Wow. I mean, do you hear that? The humans, we're going out of our way to make ourselves more confusing to each other.
Yeah, and we're eating the wrong food, and we're legislating our body parts. Like, we're a mess.
Right. So right now, what this is, I hope this goes forward and encourages a whole generation of women to be like, wow, I just learned so much more about my body.
I sure hope so, Danielle. I sure hope so.
Oh, right. One final thing that I want, because I know it exists primarily animals, humans, that would be interesting. Parthenogenesis, in which a female can spontaneously become pregnant, but only delivers more females.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of invertebrates do this, but actually a lot of vertebrates do it as well. Really? And it's basically when there's a shortage of males, or it can also depend on resource availability. So in times of abundant resources, females may seek to have sex, or they may seek to have only clones. There's a lot of variability around it, and it depends on the species. But yes, and so females will make only clones, though, which is they maintain the ability to reproduce sexually as well for reasons of genetic diversity. But absolutely, if males are lacking, many females retain the ability to do this and create viable populations. And in a lot of cases, I'm thinking of some bees or some wasps, females will always only produce other females unless they get sperm, in which case they'll produce some males. But it's all good. They can just keep on pollinating and doing their thing as a clonal female population until such time as that arrives. Wouldn't that be great if humans could do that?
Really? Do you hear that, men of the world trying to control our bodies? We're either going to evolve descended vaginas, or we're just going to start cloning ourselves because you're becoming too dangerous. All right? Evolution has been one of
those major arguments. It's one of the major arguments about sex. It's like, why are males still in the population? Why aren't males like male anglerfish, who are basically just little swimming balls of sperm that attach to a female's body and fuse with it? Mm-hmm. Like, it's actually one of the big conundrums in science. Why? Why do males persist?
I don't know. I would say humans like them. We like males. When you're not trying to kill us or dominate us or smother us, we like you guys. So do better.
Can't live
what was that?
Them, can't live without them.
I know. We all say the same thing about each other, right? Except, again, they're the shovel, and we're the rest of the building do all the work. So, wow.
And use that analogy. Actually, I really like that analogy. I'm going to keep using that.
It's applicable because it creates such a wonderful visual. I'm a visual learner, so that really helps me.
She has to coordinate all the workers. Everything. She has to do everything. He dropped off shop.
Blueprints, drafts, everything. Dr. Carin Bondar. Okay, tell everyone how they can reach you, your website, or however you'd like to be found.
great. I have, Carin Bondar, CarinBondar.com. I have a couple books there, Wild Sex and Wild Moms. I have an online course that's pretty new. It's the Wild Sex Level 1.
Ooh, yes.
So, speaking of your campfire where you were talking about the elephants and hyenas, I designed the course to make it wicked party trivia for people who want to drop things like that at parties.
There you go.
It's at Udemy. You can find it in Udemy. It's just Wild Sex. I think it's called that. But yes, those are my things. And I'm going to be traveling this summer, doing a couple cruises, and then back to the grind. More and more and more cool biology stuff.
Yeah, and you do such cool biology stuff. Amazing how you both stay active, and you are a mother as well, aren't you? An incredible, fierce woman. Science, biology, human, divine. You're so amazing.
You're amazing, and I'm so glad you're in my life. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking out this time with me. I hope to talk with you soon.
Absolutely.
And, yes, let the world know when you're in New York, and it'll be great. Okay.
I'll be there soon. And once I get my dates, let's figure something out and do it.
Marvelous. There you go. Maybe we can do an in-house special and check out the Museum of Natural History or the Bronx Zoo.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
Hey, there you go. Right in our own backyard. Cool. Okay. This has been so incredible. I will see you around. You be well. And I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Where's that?